You've probably asked yourself, how does someone react to genocide?
Okay. So it's
Like
like
this.
IDF blowing up buildings. These are all their TikToks. Who's gonna be living in tents in Gaza?
Your baby's here.
The answer is they've been conditioned to, and it starts in their education system. Here are 3 examples of how Israel teaches the
Yeah, so like TikTok is a great example where you can just go and see what Israelis are posting about it, and like, you know, dressing up as like people in Gaza that don't have electricity, or like turning their lights on and off to brag that they have power and they don't. Things like that.
Palestinians. According to this Israeli professor's research, Israeli textbooks show Palestinians, or Arabs as they're called,
The
as
chanting death to
caricatures
Arabs.
of primitive farmers, hordes of refugees, or they're masked and painted as terrorists.
You cannot find one photograph of a human being who is a Palestinian.
And it might explain how you end up with videos like this.
We need to kill Arabs.
The way they are represented are as the problems and threats. And since they never or hardly ever meet Palestinians face to face or speak to them, although they may live 50 to 100 meters from them, this is what they know.
If you type map of Israel in Hebrew into Google, this is what you'll get. Notice how a lot of these maps have no clear markings showing the occupied West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, all of which are internationally recognized as illegally occupied Palestinian territories. You'll also find this map in Israeli textbooks. It's how you end up with illegal settlers colonizing more and more Palestinian land, claiming it's their God-given right.
It's all it. What you see? It's belong to Israel.
And it's how you end up with scenes like this.
You have this necklace?
That's Palestine, yeah.
This is Israel.
Land is ours. This is the entire land, including Gaza.
Students in Israel are taught about the Holocaust.
So here, so that lady that was chanting that in front of the military, that's like one of the top like Israeli like pop artists. So, you know, when you have like, it's like, you know, you have Taylor Swift like chanting to the U.S. Army about like how they're gonna kill everyone in Iraq, you know, at the Iraq War. It's like you normalize it by getting like popular figures to repeat these ideas.
Students in Israel are taught about the Holocaust starting in nursery school all the way to the 12th grade. Part of that learning is looking at horrifying images, or exercises that encourage students to put themselves in the shoes of the victims and relate to the experience. The identification of students with the victims isn't a coincidence. It's an intentional policy by the Israeli Ministry of Education. It's how you end up with a society where, according to one Israeli professor, every Jewish Israeli citizen is a Holocaust survivor or a potential victim of future Holocaust-like events.
The goal is traumatization and revenge, and not to let the fire of vengeance die out. However, this vengeance is not directed towards the German persecutors and their collaborators in Europe, but towards Palestinian colonized subjects who are Nazified.
This video is like one of the scariest. It's like this group of angelic singing children talking about the destruction of Gaza.
Who are Nazified.
So it's like,
It's creepy as fuck.
yeah, so she's singing, look at the IDF crossing the line. She's even singing that they're crossing the line. They're bragging about the fact that they're crossing the line. So to annihilate the swastika bearers.
The fact that Palestinians had nothing to do
I'll
with
show
the
you the whole video of
Holocaust
that later.
and that they
It's
are
pretty
the
good.
ones currently being exterminated seems to be irrelevant. With this weaponization of the Holocaust, Zionism isn't seen for the settler colonial racist ideology that it is, but as the savior of the Jewish people. And it's this thinking and this fear that is weaponized to justify the violence of the Zionist state. That it must exist and do whatever is necessary to defend itself so that another Holocaust would never happen again. That's how you end up with videos like this.
It is a terrorist organization which murders Jews because they're Jews.
Once the Jewish people were defenseless, no longer.
So why does this matter? Israelis spend 12 years in this education system, teaching them to dehumanize Palestinians and see them as people looking to eliminate Jews, not an oppressed, colonized people looking for freedom. And once they graduate, most Jewish Israelis will go straight to the military to do their 2 to 3 years of mandatory service.
So it's like literally like a factory, like a propaganda factory, the whole education system, and like the mandatory military service. Like you're taught all of this, and then like you yourself go in the military. Like, you have to. Like if you say no, you're put in jail. Like they put you. You know, it's like in gangs when you have the initiation. They have to like to prove that you're like willing to do crazy shit. Like you have to go and kill a guy to then join the gang. This is the same thing to a different, obviously it's a bit different, but same idea. You know, normalizing and for every civilian to have that military experience. But actually this is ironic too, because that's the main reason why they had such a huge military failure on October 7th and all the time afterwards too, is because the military is just these like, you know, young Gen Z people like, you know, making TikToks and stuff, and you know, all they're used to doing is like bullying Palestinians and, you know, doing checks on their houses and ransacking their houses and, you know, shooting people in their kneecap if they get too close to the wall, you know, dropping bombs from like a computer video game type interface. That's what they're used to. And so when it came to like actually, you know, fighting on the ground in like urban warfare that requires like you know, a certain level of physical fitness and training, they didn't have that, you know. So they just got, again, it was like their arrogance that, you know, they just had, oh, we're so powerful, you know, you guys have nothing, we have all this stuff, there's no way you can touch us. And so they kind of let their guard down, or, you know, didn't even realize that they, you know, or they'd hope they wouldn't get exposed as how weak they were militarily.
Lines of apartheid and occupation. That's how we end up with videos like this.
Who's gonna live in the tents in Gaza? Air Force bombed the buildings down. It's like a music festival they're singing.
So why do all this? Well, Israel can only exist as a Jewish state if it manages demographics to maintain a Jewish majority. And it does so by displacing, imprisoning, and murdering Palestinians routinely. And the only way to get Jews to participate in this is by convincing them that it's the only way for them to exist safely. Seeing Palestinians as people who want to live in peace and be free doesn't fit into that plan. Subscribe for more and support us on Patreon.
And so like they have this narrative that Israel is the only safe place for Jews, when in fact it's probably the most dangerous place for Jews, and it will continue to be as long as, you know, you're living next door to a concentration camp. You know, that should be the more disturbing part. And
absolutely insane.
Yeah. I wanted to show this earlier too, but anyone who wants to like learn more about this stuff, like I recommend Norman Finkelstein's work, as like he's probably, you know, has the most like accolades and academic rigor and, you know, relevant history and airtight argument for everything going on. You know, it's like the most kind of based in truth and facts and reality, and he kind of touches on that. And, you know, I'd say like my opinion like closely matches with his take.
Well, I don't want to quibble over terminology, but sometimes if the terminology is wrong at the outset, then it confuses things moving forward. I'm not pro-Palestinian. I'm not pro-Israeli. I'm pro-truth, and I'm pro-justice. If the truth is on the Israeli side, I will support Israel. If justice is on the Israeli side, I'll support Israel. And the same thing goes for the Palestinians. I've spent the greater part of my adult life, you can say beginning 1982, so it's more than 4 decades, researching, studying the Israel-Palestine conflict. And it's my conclusion at the end of that research, but already early on, that the case that Israel makes for its crimes are in large part fabrications, misrepresentations, and distortions. And on the other hand, the Palestinian case is very strongly supported by the evidence. And when I speak about evidence, I'm not talking about what Hamas says any more than when I speak about Israel. I care much about what the government says. If you're serious about these sorts of things, the first thing you do is you try to search out sources which have a certain amount of credibility. So when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, let's say the human rights dimension, you look at what respected human rights organizations have to say: Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the B'Tselem, the main Israeli information center for the occupied territories. You look at what the evidence shows, not based on biased sources or naturally biased sources, but on the available evidence. And I try to be a strict adherent of the two principles of truth and justice. And that's where I landed. And I think that's frankly where most of the world has landed. And it's also, incidentally, but not trivially, it's where a large part of the young Jewish population has landed. If you go to the demonstrations now, the ones that have garnered the headlines, say the one in Grand Central Station, was overwhelmingly Jewish. It was organized by Jewish organizations. Young people, mostly, but not entirely. The Statue of Liberty demonstration, again, it was Jewish young people who organized the demonstration. So this idea that it's somehow polarized ethnically is belied by the facts. Now, I will wholeheartedly admit that when I first started out, we were a handful of people, Jews, who opposed what Israel was doing. But the spectrum has radically changed in recent years. I'm just one among a large number, a sea of Jews who oppose what's going on, not because they're self-hating, not because they're indifferent to the fate of Israelis, but because the evidence is overwhelming. It's impossible. You start out by saying you're not knowledgeable about the topic. Fair enough, there are 10,000 topics I'm not knowledgeable about, and where you have much more knowledge. I'm quite certain of that. But this is not a particularly complicated situation right now. The Israeli government is openly, unabashedly, flagrantly, blatantly, it's declared a war of genocide on the people of Gaza. That's not exaggerated language. The Prime Minister of Israel said in a speech which has been reproduced everywhere, he said, this is a war against Amalek, referring to the Old Testament. And what's a war against Amalek? Well, just open up the Old Testament. It obliges Israel to kill every man, woman, and child. That's what it means to invoke a war against Amalek.
So yeah, like his full podcasts are really good too, but he just has like a way of just like calmly dismantling that whole idea. And another point of what he said, I think, is like that's for me is like the biggest hope I have is like the people that are speaking out against this the most are younger people, and like Gen Z specifically, people who grew up around the internet. They can kind of, they don't have as much of the propaganda from like mainstream media where they grew up kind of getting more diversity of opinion, and some of the biggest kind of proponents against Israel are these like Jewish groups, and in fact even like Orthodox Jews, because the ironic thing is in like Judaism itself, the Jews are not allowed to establish a state until the return of the Messiah, and so establishing Israel as a state before the return of the Messiah goes directly against the religion itself. And so the fact that it's being said that this is for Jews or for like Judaism is like refuted just with that fact. And the prime minister, who's again like quoting the Old Testament to justify the war, he's an atheist. So again, people are not seeing how religion is again being abused. And all the Jews that are strict adherents of Judaism and see that, like, of course, like killing innocent people is wrong. Like they say that anyone who does that, like they wouldn't consider them a Jew. And so and doing all that evil stuff in the name of Jews is what seeds and kind of promotes more anti-Semitism than anything else, you know? So the most anti-Semitic people are the people that are using the name of Judaism or Jews to commit these atrocities.